Next, we have our panel, The Great Controversy. Blockchain is seen from the major institutions' perspective. Your moderator is David Drake, founder and chairman at LDJ Capital, book author, contributed to the U.S. Job Acts. Please welcome David. Dr. Nouriel Roubini, CEO of Roubini Macro Associates, co-founder and former chairman of Roubini Global Economics, predicted the global financial crisis in 2008. Please welcome Dr. Roubini. David Lee, professor at SUSS, director at LeftCoast, co-founder of BlockAsset Ventures and LIBAI.io. Please welcome David. Sterlin Lujan, communications ambassador at Bitcoin.com. Please welcome Sterlin. Sang Lee, investor, president, and CEO at DarcMatter, contributor to Huffington Post. Please welcome Sang. Tone Vays, ex-Wall Street professional, crypto and blockchain educator, researcher, and consultant. Please welcome Tone. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll have a seat and introduce everybody. My name is David Drake, originally born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden, ended up in the US 30 years ago, and built up my family office on Wall Street the last 22, and had the opportunity to work with SEC and FINRA in 11, 12, 13, and 14 to pass the Jobs Act. And actually, Sang Lee was with me in those early days. We'll introduce him in a second. But we had managed to get the 33, 34 Act allow us to advertise for the first time in the US. And those exemptions are quite complicated. But today we'll talk more about what institutions are doing in this space. And I'm going to also want to introduce everybody on the panel, have them talk about their background, and then start discussing what the institutions are doing and whether they're coming into the space, where they're coming from, and why. In my opinion, I think they already got into the space. It's just not public knowledge yet, but we'll see what everybody has to say. Now, Nouriel Roubini and I will go back 12 years, and he had a keynote earlier this morning. Since I think most people would love to hear more about your background, being a professor, you taught in Abu Dhabi, you have probably taught in Shanghai too. Maybe you can tell us more about where you went to school and how you ended up becoming an economist.
Okay. Well, I was born in Turkey, then from Turkey moved to Iran, then to Israel, then to Italy, where I grew up. Went to college there, and then I came to US to do my PhD at Harvard, then taught at Yale, ended up at New York University over 20 years ago, and then I went to Washington, worked in the White House for 2 years during the Clinton years. And then I became an expert, I would say, mostly of financial crisis. First as an academic, then in policy circles, and maybe I became more of a household name in 2007-8 during the global financial crisis. I was one of the few economists that predicted the global financial crisis. Literally a year ago, August 2008, there was an article in New York Times Magazine titled "Dr. Doom." It was talking about me predicting the financial crisis, and since then, the nickname Dr. Doom has stuck, even if I tend to say I'm a Dr. Realist rather than Dr. Doom. And I would say my expertise in global macro is financial crisis, asset and credit bubbles, systemic crisis. I've written several books about it, and I've been in policy and predicted financial crisis. And my expertise in this crypto blockchain came from the fact that when there is a bubble, I can see a bubble based on my academic, policy, empirical research experience. And that's where I came and said, this is the mother of all bubbles that in the last year, actually, I think has gone bust already.
Well, thank you for that, Nouriel. I haven't seen you in a couple of years. Actually, my wife, we had a date, and we ended up going to his party 3 years ago. So it's a little personal relationship there. That was kind of neat. Good memories. Now we have David Lee. You were involved with Fenbushi and Genesis. Maybe you can tell us a little about that background, David?
Yes, I started my career as academic back in the 80s. After my study in London School of Economics, and 93 I became a stockbroker. In 1998 I formed my own hedge fund, and I ran a few listed companies, and by 2012 I decided that I should return to academic full-time. And that's where I started doing research on inclusive fintech, and also looking at how financial inclusion can change the world. And by 2013, I chanced upon Bitcoin and started doing a lot of research and writing about it. And by early last year, I decided that besides investing in my own company, I have a few partners and I formed BlockAsset. That's where we started. And Genesis Finance Group has got 4 funds: Fambushi Capital, Fambushi Digital, BK Fund, and BlockAsset. We have different functions, but as far as...
How big is it? Do you know the AUM?
Well, we'll be quite a huge size because we were there quite early. And what it is that for BlockAsset itself, we have our own partners fund. We started just with 10 million, very small size, a few years ago. But our focus is mainly on using technology to do good. So we look at inclusive fintech and inclusive blockchain, especially in the area of financial inclusion. So how blockchain can actually change the world by helping those 70% of the people, especially in Asia, to actually enjoy some of the benefits we have in this world, especially when they're excluded.
Well, thank you for that. The alarm went off. Sterlin, now we have you living in Texas and also part of Bitcoin.com. You want to tell us how you got involved with Bitcoin.com?
Yeah, sure. So really early on in 2013, I was actually working toward a bachelor's degree in psychology at Texas A&M University. And around that time, I discovered Bitcoin because previously I had spent a lot of time studying the Austrian economists Murray Rothbard, Ludwig von Mises, and started to understand what sound money is all about. But at the same time, I came into contact with this group of individuals called the crypto-anarchists and the cypherpunks. I started studying these individuals, namely Timothy May, Eric Hughes, etc., and I started learning that we can leverage these types of technologies to help get a better grasp on freedom, to help undermine the state apparatus and bring more privacy, freedom, and individuality back to the person. And as I started to understand these ideas, I also came into contact with Roger Ver, our company CEO, who's also a well-known voluntarist. And I believe it was in 2015, he acquired the domain name for Bitcoin.com and then started the company in 2016. And I immediately was brought on board because I was working on a Facebook page that some people might have heard of called The Art of Not Being Governed. And so I was deeply enmeshed in meme warfare on the art of not being governed. And I worked with an individual by the name of Jamie Redman. Jamie Redman is still working for Bitcoin.com as a crypto journalist. And he had already known Roger, so he got invited to start working for Bitcoin.com, and subsequently, I was headhunted and brought onto the company as well. I've been with Bitcoin.com since then, which really was the very beginning of the company. But I've just here recently, last year, started the position of communications ambassador. So I literally travel the world talking about these ideas concerning freedom, concerning our company's mission, about leveraging Bitcoin Cash to help bring more economic freedom to as many people as possible. But also I bring this message of the cypherpunks and individual freedom using digital technologies to as many people as possible. And actually, I started to work on my master's degree in counseling right about the time that I took this job as communications ambassador. But I decided that this goal of bringing more of this technology to as many people as possible was more important than finishing my master's degree in college. So I quit school, and now I do this full-time, talking about cryptocurrency, talking about freedom, and talking about leveraging compassion and interaction to get this technology in the hands of everyone.
Thank you, Sterlin. You got some support there in the audience. Good. Are you guys from Texas? No? Sang Lee, you and I go back 5 years, 6 years, doing the crowdfunding days and the Jobs Act. Good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while. We're both in New York, and I haven't seen him for a few years. So a good place to catch up. So tell us about DarcMatter and your involvement in the space.
Yeah, so for me, I was a former aspiring astrophysicist, hence the name, turned financial engineer, turned investment banker, but most of my career was mired in the crisis that Nouriel predicted. So all of my banking career was actually in the height of the crisis. And I think it was a great experience. I was able to meet David. We were part of the kind of private consortium that that basically work together to create more democratic finance, more access to capital through the Jobs Act. And that immerses you really deeply into how financial institutions work, how the regulations are structured, what they're designed to do. And when we started the company DarcMatter, we wanted to use, I guess in the most basic stage, kind of a distributed ledger technology, early stages of blockchain. But at the time, financial services or asset management, nobody was actually using any kind of technology at all. Even using cloud servers were kind of unheard of at the time. So basically, fast forward to 2016, 2017, and we're basically decentralizing ourselves, the business that we've built, using a technology that is now being adopted, being accepted, and people are learning more about it in a way that can really protect the participants of that system. And that's what we're working on. We're working on the asset management side of the business, where we connect fund managers and investors, but to be honest, we're a centralized platform. We are the ones that are running the platform. We want to decentralize ourselves, whereby the direct connections between an investor and a product or an opportunity can become seamless all around the world, and people can earn by providing their expertise and services without having to be part of a large centralized institution like the banks or giant law firms that are basically controlling a lot of policy as well as direction of capital flow, whether it's regulators that are supporting them or whether it's governments that are trying to protect their own national security. People talk about compliance in a bad way, and that's because the system was designed to protect those incumbents. But if you actually look at it from a different perspective, compliance is designed to protect the participants, as long as you comply in a way that doesn't centralize the control of that protection. I.e., if you can create a technological system where you can protect the investor, but it doesn't rely on somebody's opinion to protect that investor at the end of the day, which is what we're building up.
Well, Sang, tell me, so your clients are GPs of funds that want to reach investors, and then you aggregate them globally? How does it work?
Yeah, correct. So we work with both asset managers as well as investors. The problem is on both sides. Right now, financial services is designed in such a way that you are sold a specific product, and basically that's the product that you buy. You don't really understand why you buy it. You don't really care why you buy it at the end of the day. Something like 2008 happens, and then you start asking the right questions. We think that the investor side needs to become better educated as well. That's the financial inclusion. That's tied to financial education. Our platform allows both sides to connect. It's not just a product distribution mechanism. Most investors can't access most of Wall Street's products for various different reasons. And we won't go down that rabbit hole. But
so you have crypto funds there now?
We are working with crypto funds now as well.
So then you're matching up with LPs that want to come into them.
So if new investors want to get involved in crypto, potentially they may not be as tech savvy, which most people aren't in the investor world, and they'll be able to invest into a fund that is managed hopefully with very low fees.
Tone, we'll get you in a second. I haven't seen Sang for a while. So how many funds do you have on your platform now that's in the crypto space?
So right now in the crypto space, we're working with about 15 funds. Some of I can't say the names here because it ends up being a weird regulatory environment, but we're working with some of the top crypto funds as well as crypto fund of funds that have been investing for a number of years now. And there is a lot more interest that we're seeing from the LP side. I won't say that all of a sudden all of our LPs from 62 countries are roaring for crypto investments right now, but there definitely is an interest in the education side, understanding what this asset class looks like and how it's going to affect the larger economic system.
Thank you, Sang. Thank you. Well, Tone, a pleasure having you here. Love to hear about your positioning with Bitcoin versus non-Bitcoin.
Sure. So I'm Tone Vays. I spoke on this panel earlier in the morning. I'm not going to talk too much about myself. Come from the background in financial engineering, worked on Wall Street, was at Baird during the financial collapse, joined the crypto space around 2013, 2014, and now I actually could to be a trader, but now I mostly travel, speak at events, and run a YouTube channel with daily videos explaining everything. Just my quick comment on my outlook on the space. I pretty much disagree with Nouriel that everything in the crypto space is useless and is not functioning. But I mostly agree with him because only Bitcoin, I believe, is actually useful, and everything else is either totally useless or outright scammy and fraudulent, more to the latter than the useless part. But but anything scammy is also useless. However, I also completely disagree with the prior speaker, Alex, that debated Nouriel Roubini, that because he thinks Ethereum is actually sustainable or useful. So their debate would have been extremely frustrating to me from both sides.
So you see, we have a nice mix of people on the panel. Thank you for that, Tone. Well, let's go in and discuss what's happening with institutions. Who wants to go first to talk about what you're seeing in the institutional space? Any takers?
I mean, I can jump in. To be honest, I haven't seen much. All I've seen is talk about the institutions getting in, but as far as I'm concerned, no one really is. Because Bitcoin and crypto, it's totally unregulated market. And institutions have to follow regulations. So it's not exactly easy for them to get in. I honestly think it's all hype. You can tell the institutions aren't really in, but the low volume on the futures market. That's like the only legitimate product within the crypto space you can trade as an institution, and the volume there is tiny. So I honestly don't think they're getting in. They're probably researching it. They're looking at it. But I don't think they're in. Maybe some hedge funds have bought into Bitcoin. But then there's also custodian issues. I mean, even hedge funds have to follow regulations. And now they're responsible for their own storage of Bitcoin. Hopefully, they only bought Bitcoin. But, you know, securing your Bitcoin is almost like securing nuclear waste. You really need to know what you're doing, or it's going to get hacked from you, internally or externally. I think it's more hype than actually getting in right now.
I think I'd have to kind of agree with Tone with the clients that we're working with. I think there's a lot of media, there's a lot of popular press, if you will, that's talking about the imminent inflection point that, you know, everything in Wall Street is suddenly changing over into cryptocurrency. That's not the case. There are actual physical hurdles of intrinsic risk that a $1 trillion company has that they cannot do. It's physically impossible for them to do it for certain activities. There is some profiteering, I think, that's happening at funds. You know, there's talks of the prop desks. There's profiteering, but that's what Wall Street does. It's profiteering of specific kind of opportunistic moments, which they think maybe right now is, and they're trying to prep up for it. But I think this is the most important thing about this discussion is that, you know, we're here at a blockchain conference, right? And barring Nouriel, you know, I'm guessing there are general positive sentiments about the industry, whether it's cryptocurrency or blockchain, and the efficacy and the change that's coming from it. But what I've seen, and we kind of stand at the cusp, is it's very antagonistic toward each other. Right? There is a institutional side. There's Wall Street. Oh my God, we got to block out Wall Street. We got to wipe them out. And then there's the other side of the business, which is Wall Street saying, well, you guys are kind of stonewalling us, and we're trying to learn, but I guess we're just like anti to each other. So, which means we have to take certain protective mechanisms if we think there's a threat, right?
No, I was going to say 90% of Wall Street, they're middleman. 90% of everything done on Wall Street is being middleman, and I think they're trying to figure out how to be a middleman. That doesn't mean they're going to buy into crypto. They'll replace Ethereum with a centralized platform that works a lot better. They're trying to figure out how to be middleman.
So I'm going to go ahead and secure my position in the echo chamber here because I basically agree with these guys. Here's what's going on. We actually do have some evidence. There was a recent study by Deloitte that suggests that 44% of most corporate businessmen, most investors, think that this space is overhyped. And I think to a degree it is overhyped because, like these guys said, the space is totally inundated right now with scams and nonsense. And I don't agree completely with Tone that every single project necessarily besides Bitcoin is a scam. But it is very clear that a good percentage of what's going on in the space right now is either some kind of scam, what we refer to colloquially as a shitcoin, is deeply enmeshed in the space. And what I'm seeing from institutions is the same. They're not really wanting to do anything. Maybe they have I think even, what was it, Wells Fargo, a couple of the major banks maybe instituted like a research wing and have like a pseudo crypto guy that's looking into some of the materials, but they haven't actually got to the point of jumping into the space. And I think a lot of times they're trying to put the cart before the horse anyway. They want to look into some random use cases for blockchain, and that's really not the direction we need to be going. Personally, I have this idea that we need to create an environment that's ripe for mass adoption. And if we can't create an environment that's ripe for mass adoption, then we're totally missing the point. And in my vision, we should be using cryptocurrency as the killer application. And we already have that. And banks are looking at some use case for blockchain that hasn't even been vindicated to any degree and probably doesn't even make sense. So that's my position on what's going on.
David, Nouriel, David, you have a big fund that you're working with. Are there institutional investors there?
Okay, there are three types of institutions that we can talk about, just rather than just financial institutions. As far as financial institutions is concerned, in 1998, when I was a hedge fund manager, I couldn't even get a prime broker. And a lot of investment consultants would never ask them to invest in hedge fund in 1998. It took a long time. That is the same situation now in crypto.
Yeah,
it takes some time for that. That's the first type of institution. The second type of institution will be corporate institution. If you look at Asia, most of the institutions, whether they are fintech companies or the banks, you can hear that JD.com is now running open blockchain. People who are not familiar, JD.com is one of the largest fintech company. Ping An Insurance, who earns about 100 million renminbi every hour, has got a blockchain for One Connect for smart cities. And if you look at Ant Financial, they are all into blockchain all over. Because we are just not talking about cryptocurrency, we are talking about token economy, which is very different. And the last type of institution is government institutions. And if you look at Singapore, the Singapore government really understands the crypto space. And they really understand what cryptocurrency can do, what can be regulated and what cannot be regulated. And if you look at all their policies, they're promoting the use of token economy, utility token and hybrid tokens, to ensure that there is enough scalability, there is enough good technology, and also have new business model to serve the new customers. The reason being that the token economy is about complementing the government institutions as well as corporate institutions. And the reason being that any blockchain without a token is just an inefficient ledger. And token is very important in trying to address the inefficiencies in the global economy at this moment, rather than just printing money where we have really 4 times the balance sheet going up.
So is it possible that Malta will be a Singaporean equivalent in Europe one day then?
I think at this moment there are 27 countries looking at having their own cryptocurrency, which is a little bit of irony because that is a centralized governance cryptocurrency with decentralized technology. And people have to get used to the idea that when you have a crypto economy, there will be areas where you have to look at the cost of trust. Because when you are open blockchain, the cost of trust is almost zero, and the cost of scaling is almost zero. But the minute you go off-chain, you need to delegate the trust. And the whole idea about crypto economy is about fintech engineering. It is not financial engineering. We are moving from financial engineering to fintech engineering, using technology on top of financial engineering to see how we can improve the welfare of everybody in this world.
So Nouriel?
Well, I think I agree with 99% of what Ton was saying. He believes in Bitcoin, but thinks that everything else from blockchain to cryptocurrencies are scams or a fraud. I would agree. Maybe Bitcoin is not a fraud, but is not scalable. So it's nice it's there, but doesn't have any future. We probably disagree on that. Even Sterling
I can debate that, but not here.
But we can disagree on Bitcoin. Even Sterling said that, there's tons of scam. Maybe half of this space is a scam. So the data suggests that 81% of SEOs are scam, another 11% have essentially failed or are dead, and the remaining 8% have lost 95% of their value this year alone. So this entire space is collapsing. So institutions are not to invest into stuff that's collapsing. You can create a fund, you can create a fund of fund, you can create a hedge fund, you can create whatever you want to. But if you invest into assets, on average lose 95% of their value in 9 months, nobody's going to invest in that space. Why would anybody want to go and lose money, right? Unless you're trying to short this space and make money that way. So there's a lot of talk about the institution getting there, but this is a space where you have lost 95% of your wealth if you entered it this year, so nobody's interested. Plus there are all the regulatory constraints, This is a space where the typical ICO is a security, but is a non-compliant security and goes against skirting every security law. You have institutions that have to follow security laws. How do you expect any of these institutions coming in this space where you have a bunch of criminal and scams? There have been attempts by the Winklevoss brothers and others to create an ETF for Bitcoin of crypto. Rightly, the SEC told them several times, are you guys crazy? Are you guys nuts? There are academic evidence that this market is totally manipulated. Do we want to create an ETF open to everybody where the price of these things are manipulated day in, day out? Hundreds, thousands of pump and dump schemes, spoofing, wash trading, front running. That's what the market is all about. How do you expect anybody who's an institutional investor who has to be compliant with all the rules and regulation, KYC, AML, is going to enter into this space? It's just nuts. It's just delusional. A bunch of people in this space who are just trading shit coins day in, day out. We've lost all of this value, and no serious institution is going to seriously think about it. That's the reality.
All right, so we have a different opinion. Just a slight. But in Singapore, on the other hand, they're embracing it.
Yeah, I think what Nouriel says is correct, that 99% of the coin will fail. I think nobody will dispute that, even whether you believe in that. But we really need to look at what the world has become. Why are we having so many regulations? Why there's the loss of trust? We have to go back to the very basic of the functioning of the financial market. And there's a real problem in the financial market. We have a lot of regulation that the intermediaries cannot function. And that's the reason why we need to have the blockchain to change the world in a different way, to ensure that those areas which are inefficient, we have to build ecosystem to change that. That is the key point. And I agree everything that you have said. And we don't really like all those pumping and, as well as dumping. And that shouldn't exist in the first place. But on the other hand, we have to look at the entire market. I have run a fund of $1 billion in the real estate and so on. And at a certain time, we need to look at the entire space of the financial market. Are they really worth what they are? Is this the biggest bubble that we are seeing at this moment? Those are important because you have seen crashes in the financial market. The question is, how do we address those issues using blockchain? We have to look at that angle.
First of all, we agree 99% of them are going to fail. I would say 99.99% of them are going to fail. Maybe a few years from now, there'll be only Bitcoin. There'll be just
that's my view on things. That's my view on things that will be Bitcoin.
I agree. Bitcoin is going to be there. It's going to worth close to zero, but it's going to be there. But there are inefficiencies. No, there are inefficiencies in the financial market, and there is lots of stuff is happening in financial institutions to change it. It's called Fintech, right? But Fintech has nothing to do with blockchain. Why do you need blockchain? It's based on AI, it's based on big data, it's based on Internet of Things, it's revolutionizing payment system, insurance, credit allocation, capital markets, asset allocation. Has nothing to do with blockchain. You have today billions of people in China, in India, in Africa, in the US, billions of people doing billions of transactions every day using digital payment system. It's called Alipay, it's called WeChat Pay, it's called Venmo, it's called M-Pesa, it's called UPI system in India, it's called Square, it's called PayPal. Billions of transactions a day, billions of people. What has that to do with blockchain or crypto? Zero. Zero below zero, has nothing to do. And those are real firms with real projects, with making real money, who are really revolutionizing and democratizing the financial system. A poor farmer in Kenya can use M-Pesa on his own mobile phone. It has nothing to do with blockchain. It can borrow money, can lend money, can do transactions, can make a living out of it. Why does it have anything to do with blockchain? There's nothing to do with blockchain, the fintech revolution. It's all talk. It's all bullshit.
Can I jump in on that to answer that?
Yeah, you go ahead and I will say something.
Yeah. So look, I do agree that right now, Bitcoin and blockchain in general is not the best competition for the payment system. I'm not going to debate that part. Now, what Satoshi Nakamoto created with Bitcoin, the peer-to-peer digital cash, so Bitcoin's blockchain, I don't care about the rest of them. Bitcoin blockchain competes in 3 ways. For the first time in human history, you have an asset that is unconfiscatable. Now, the only way to have an unconfiscatable asset is to not have a physical form of that asset. Your real estate's confiscatable, your car is confiscatable, your gold bars are confiscatable, your money in the bank is confiscatable. Bitcoin is unconfiscatable if you properly hold it. That's one advantage. That's one advantage that Bitcoin has. The other advantage or disadvantage, depending on which economist you talk to, Bitcoin took the principle of gold. Bitcoin has a finite supply. It has a predictable inflation rate of new Bitcoins. So Bitcoin is also competing with the current monetary system on monetary policy because it's unchangeable because of the way the blockchain works. Now, the third thing that Bitcoin offers is unconfiscatable value transfer. This is the part that you say it's only for criminals. I don't like to blame anyone for the medium of exchange that they're using. So it's not competing on speed, even though it's not bad. It's not competing on the cost of a transaction. It's not competing on scale, though that functionality is coming. It's competing on the fact that your value transfer is censorship resistant. Nobody can stop that payment. Now, you can disagree why we need that, but these are the 3 points where Bitcoin actually competes well. As far as having 1 million transactions a second, that should be here in a couple of years. More privacy should be here in a couple of years.
I would disagree on one point. It's not true that they cannot be confiscated. The G20 has already said, and Steve Mnuchin, Secretary of the Treasury of the Donald Trump administration, has said, we cannot allow Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to become the next Swiss bank account where essentially money launderer, criminal, terrorist, tax evaders are using essentially something to evade the laws and regulation. And the trend is going to be that, I'm sorry to say, there is not going to be anonymity in Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. If you have any crypto asset, you have to declare it. I have to know that you have that money. If you make a capital gain, like me and you, we have to pay taxes on those capital gains. Means anonymity is gone. There's not going to be any government anywhere around the world, not even the US of Trump, is going to accept anonymity.
I agree
nonsense.
that they want
once
that.
it's not anonymous, can be taxed, can be confiscated, can be restricted, can be everything like any other asset. It's a delusion to believe that this asset is anonymous and cannot be confiscated.
They don't want people smoking weed either, but they can't stop it, right? Like they want that, but there's nothing they can do about it.
Something that's digital can be controlled better than something that is not. It's going to be controlled, regulated. You're going to be taxed on every penny of it.
I have 2 points to respond. The first point is to anonymity. Even you're using Zcash. If I am Bank A, you're Bank B, and I transfer my money to you, it can be by regulation that we have to send a message to the central bank and let the central bank know who is receiving and who is transferring. So it is a case where you have efficiency improvement, and yet you do not compromise on regulation and also the functioning of a proper financial system. That's the first point. And that's a misunderstanding of people about crypto. Second thing is about financial inclusion. There's still 60% of people without financial banking account, and more than 80% have no financial services. So to respond to that point is that China has brought 600 million people out of poverty, but a centralized fintech firm is still a centralized fintech firm because a sharing economy without asset sharing will lead to concentration of wealth and power. And this is how we end up with 1% of the population in the world controlling 50% of the assets. And last year alone, 82% of the new wealth created given to this 1%, and this cannot continue. And the only way to address that is to have decentralization and also asset sharing. We cannot have a uniform basic income where all the business will go bust. And only through blockchain that you can have asset sharing cross-border, not able to censor it, and as well as conforming to all regulation, because even Zcash, where you have zero knowledge, you can have regulation for the intermediaries to conform to secrecy.
So just a couple of points that I wanted to make, which is kind of ironic for me. So I'm not a maximalist in either way. I believe in efficacy. I believe in the adoption. I believe in use. Right? Like anything is only useful if it's not being used. So I agree with Nouriel. If it's not being used today it's not useful. But we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? We're saying, okay, I don't like it today, so let's stop doing it because it's hurting people. Like internet became proliferated because of porn, so we should have shut down the internet. But that's not like the way innovation is actually created, right? There are bad things in innovation. The ironic point is all the things that are happening right now, front running, running the tape, that's all phrases that came from Wall Street. That it was phrases that were coined because that was activities that was done on Wall Street for stock trading that they had to ban eventually. But let's say we said stocks were used to pump and dump and scam all these moms and pops out of it, so we need to get rid of stocks and small IPOs.
And that's what happened in 1929, in the Great Depression, 33 and 34 Act.
But you can regulate it and you can protect it, but at the end of the day, now you're relying on the US government to protect you against yourself because you're not educated, and now you don't need to be educated because you have Big Brother saying, well, we protected you, so probably all the stocks are great stocks, right? And this is where the ETF discussion comes up on the reach of the SEC, like what they're actually saying, because they don't understand Bitcoin, do they even have the purview to say that this ETF is not appropriate for the market? But that's a different discussion. I think what's ironic
manipulated is illegal, so they say not ETF. The least they can do, really. I mean, the least they can do for once they did something right.
So I think what the argument now is everything that's being argued on both sides is exactly why both sides don't like it, right? We're arguing centralization. They will tax you on every penny, right? Which is probably right. They will try to tax you on every penny, which is why people are trying to shift toward a system where you cannot repossess. I mean, we talk about China a lot. We talked about like the billions of people using, Fintech, which I think is amazing. Like if you go to China, I never have to carry cash. Now that I have a WeChat, WePay account, it's fantastic. However, everybody who has more than 100 million or $1 billion there is constantly in fear of repossession. So they try to repatriate as much funds out of the country as possible, as fast as possible, by buying real estate in the United States and getting their kids citizenships, for example, right? And that's or buying Bitcoin, which they try to stop. So that is a truly centralized system that is going to war with a decentralized system right now, and we'll see how that plays out and what's important and what's not. But
mining Bitcoin so that they buy the equipment,
so they can use it later. No.
Yeah. Sterlin.
Yeah, I think what we're ultimately seeing is there's now it's finally coming up where there's this adversarial relationship between these decentralized platforms and the old antiquated system. Here's the problem. All these governments are trying to issue regulations that move at a snail's pace and can't really stop the spread of decentralized technologies and cryptocurrency. And one of the things that this gentleman mentioned, Nouriel, said that these cryptocurrencies can be confiscated, and that's in Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. That's mathematically impossible. That's impossible by the dictates of the cryptocurrency itself. You can't freeze some cryptocurrency in somebody's wallet like you can freeze somebody's bank account. For instance, of course, you hear stories like Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road, bless his heart. That's what we say in Texas. So, but what happened was they got into his personal account and got a hold of his private keys to his wallet, so they were able to transfer funds around. But you can't actually confiscate anybody's cryptocurrency from an outside source. You can't actually hack the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency protocol itself. It's very resilient to that, and that's why we refer to these systems as highly anti-fragile. They actually improve, they jump, they move, they grow in response to these types of attacks. And I want to say further that it just really blows my mind how the authoritarian mindset starts to really lose their cool when they see these technologies start to blossom and start to thrive. That's the whole goal. These cypherpunks created this technology to undercut these structures that cause so much harm, so much damage to so many innocent people. So it really revs me up to see this kind of, the mentality really the control mentality really starting to shake loose. And this will continue to happen as more cryptocurrencies with more privacy-centric features start to crop up, where there's ways that we can use multi-sig wallets and transfer in a truly decentralized fashion to each other. So this is a beautiful renaissance of freedom that we're finally moving into, and in my mind, it's about damn time.
There is no freedom. You talk about the centralization. It's bullshit. You have massive centralization of miners. 75% of all mining is controlled by 3 or 4 miners. That's a concentration of risk. miners in Russia, in Belarus, in China. So it's massive
Can
concentration.
I correct that? Can I correct that?
There is concentration of exchanges. All the decentralized exchanges do nothing. 99% of all transactions occur on centralized exchanges. The centralization of developers who control everything and change the law as they wish. Code is not law. They can change any time. And there's massive concentration of wealth. The inequality in Bitcoin space is worse than in North Korea. Gini coefficient of 0.88 in Korea is 0.86. It's pathetic. You talk about decentralization. This system is the most centralized system ever. Minor exchanges, developers, concentration of wealth. It's all bullshit about democratization of finance and freedom. It's nonsense. It's totally self-serving. It's the opposite of democracy in financial system. It's just the opposite.
Let me challenge that. I mean, I might agree with you on exchanges. The exchanges are a little bit centralized. Miners, there's a misconception about miners. You're not a miner when you are running a mining pool. So a mining pool that controls, one pool controls 20% of all mining is not controlled by one person. It's a pool. You can come and go. It's kind of like saying JP Morgan, the accounts of people in JP Morgan Chase Bank control 20% of all Americans' wealth. No, it belongs to the people. They can choose to go to another bank. So the concentration of mining isn't as bad as you say. It's not great, but it's not as bad. Development, there is certainly decentralization in development. You can't even get a minor thing into Bitcoin, as we saw with a huge debate that even split it between Bcash and Bitcoin. The miners and all of the exchanges and everybody important wanted one thing, and people like myself wanted something else, and guess what? The people won with the user-activated software.
Vitalik Buterin is a benevolent dictator for life.
Vitalik, yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I'm not going to debate that part. Vitalik is certainly a dictator for life. We'll
benevolent my ass.
As concentration of wealth is another misconception. I know they say 0.1% of all wallets control like 50% of all Bitcoins.
Not 50%, 99%.
90%. Well, first of all, a lot of those wallets are dust. They're empty. They're just, you can create these things infinitely. You got to get rid of the dust accounts. You only got to look at wallets that actually have some wealth in them. Also, some of these statistics are so fraudulent. Again, they're using Coinbase wallet that is holding Bitcoin on behalf of like 100,000 people as one person owning the Bitcoin. That's also ridiculous. Also, because you can't print your own Bitcoin, there's no interest. No matter how much Bitcoin you have no advantage to earn more Bitcoin. So sooner or later, you're going to end up using it. So this is the best part. It doesn't matter if the guy is richer than you. If the fact that he has X amount of Bitcoin doesn't earn him more Bitcoin, which is why proof of stake is ridiculous. And I'll agree with you there as well.
I want to listen. We're wrapping up. Sterlin, last word.
Yeah, I want to add a little tidbit to this idea of mining centralization. So really, in my mind, that problem is overstated anyway. And this is the reason why it's overstated. The big fear is that one of these mining pools could theoretically perform what we call a 51% attack and thereby be able to conduct double spins and thereby undermine the people who use the cryptocurrency. But most of these miners, even if there is a theoretical 50+% of control of the miners, they're not going to undermine themselves, because if they attack their own network essentially and try to steal a little bit of money, ultimately they undermine all of their own profits via mining, their own companies. So the incentives are aligned in such a powerful way that they're not going to undercut themselves unless they can overcome those incentives somehow and end up making more money. The network has to be very small for a 51% attack to really cause any damage. And then even if they did do it, it wouldn't necessarily destroy it. For instance, Zencash just recently had a 51% attack, and you need a crypto at a higher level, because if you're going to 51% attack a crypto, you need another crypto above it to move that money into. And this is why no one will ever attack 51% Bitcoin, because then the whole system dies. You have nothing on the upper level to move your money into.
Right, 100%. There have been already hundreds of 51% attack against smaller cryptocurrencies. That's the reality of it. Yeah, it's hard to do a 51% attack on Bitcoin, but come on, the 51% are occurring every other day. Every other day.
It's a heated discussion. Last words from me then, as we're up like 5 minutes ago. I think we'll agree to one thing, most likely. crypto is not disappearing. How it's going to be dealt with? Well, we didn't get to that question yet, but hopefully SEC and FINRA will tell us here in the US how to deal with it. Well, give everybody a big warm applause. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you to our panelists. That was a lively debate.